You have a project you actually want to do. Maybe it's a podcast or a video essay, and the microphone you bought for it is sitting right there on your desk. But for weeks, you haven't been able to bring yourself to turn it on. When this happens, our default instinct is to apply a tough love approach. We start lecturing ourselves and listing all the reasons we should have started by now, assuming that internal beratement will finally spark action. But then tomorrow rolls around, and you sit down at the desk again. Instead of feeling motivated by that criticism, opening the recording software feels even more difficult than it did yesterday. The friction has increased. We hold on to a deep-seated belief that being hard on ourselves is the engine of motivation. When it comes to chronic avoidance, that intuition is empirically, measurably wrong. Harsh self-criticism acts as an accelerant for procrastination. It ensures that the emotional cost of starting remains too high, guaranteeing continued paralysis. To understand why, we have to stop treating procrastination as a moral failing and look at it as a mechanical system. Psychologists refer to this feedback loop as the shame spiral. The loop begins when we put a task off. That initial avoidance immediately pumps guilt and self-criticism into the system. That guilt generates a heavy output of negative affect, feelings like shame, frustration, and self-disgust. These emotions blanket the original project. When you think about doing the work, you are no longer just facing the project itself. You are facing the emotional weight generated by having failed to do it previously. Because the brain naturally seeks to escape negative emotions, this heightened emotional cost triggers more avoidance. The loop completes, creating a closed, rapidly moving circuit. Procrastination is a mechanical failure. Adding self-criticism into this system is like pouring sand into a gearbox. It structurally prevents the gears from moving forward. This loop creates a secondary problem. The shame spiral itself becomes so uncomfortable that your brain begins looking for a way to escape the feelings of the spiral rather than the task itself. Distractions like scrolling through your phone or organizing your kitchen function as mood repair strategies. These behaviors act as a way to numb the acute guilt of not working. In this state, you are avoiding two distinct threats, the original task and the pain of failing to do it. These two forces lock together to form a massive psychological wall. Traditional productivity tools fail here because they address schedules rather than emotions. A calendar alarm cannot penetrate a wall built out of shame. Until the guilt layer is addressed, raw discipline will rarely provide enough force to break through this double avoidance barrier. Breaking this loop requires a targeted intervention. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion provides a mechanical framework to dismantle the shame spiral. The first pillar is self-kindness. This involves extending the same non-judgmental grace to yourself that you would offer a friend who was struggling. You acknowledge the difficulty without adding the weight of a harsh internal judgment. The second pillar, common humanity, frames the inability to start as a predictable outcome of human psychology. It is a well-understood mechanism that affects everyone, not a personal defect. Finally, mindfulness requires observing your current state clearly. You acknowledge that you avoided the task and that you feel bad about it, but you do so without letting those feelings define who you are. Many people assume that dropping self-criticism leads to self-indulgence or laziness. However, the data suggests that self-compassion actually increases accountability by making it safe to look at mistakes directly. When you neutralize the threat of self-criticism, you no longer need to avoid the feedback loop. This makes it possible to acknowledge a failure and immediately begin a course correction. Returning to that unused microphone, we can see the physical toll of procrastination. It has become a magnet for emotional freight. Every day you told yourself you would work, and then didn't, the task absorbed a new layer of guilt. Over weeks, a simple recording session picks up the weight of months of perceived failure. Sitting down to work now forces you to face the weight of that history. Hitting the power button feels like facing a judgment. Deliberate self-compassion severs the tether between the task and that accumulated history of negative self-evaluation. It isolates the work from the feelings about the work. Once that tether is cut, the act of starting becomes lighter. The emotional cost of picking up the microphone drops because the task is no longer carrying the freight of your past mistakes. Self-compassion is the specific intervention required to clear this emotional freight. It is the necessary first move that makes subsequent action possible.